Imagine waking up like 5 years from now and realizing you've just been permanently priced out of the global economy.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Right. And not because your skills degraded or, your industry just disappeared overnight, but because the artificial intelligence that you are legally allowed to use is, well, intentionally and structurally dumber than the AI your corporate landlord uses.
It's a completely chilling thought.
It really is. And it's exactly what we are unpacking today. Welcome to the deep dive.
Hmm.
Our mission today is to examine a really highly provocative critique of a recent policy proposal from OpenAI.
Yeah, we're essentially looking at a huge debate over who actually gets to wield the most powerful technology in human history.
Exactly. Like, are we building a world where the ultimate cognitive power is available to you, or is it going to be permanently locked behind, like, a corporate VIP door?
Right, which is arguably the most consequential economic question of our time.
Mm.
And to really explore it, we're analyzing two specific texts today.
What was the first one?
So the first is a newly published 13-page social contract proposal straight from OpenAI.
Okay.
It's titled Industrial Policy for the Intelligence Age, Ideas to Keep People First. And it basically serves as their blueprint for how advanced AI should be integrated into society.
Got it. And the second piece.
The second piece of text, which is really the main driver of our conversation, is this sharp, really critical response essay titled The Open Source Mandate for Superintelligence.
Okay, so a direct response.
Yeah. The author of this critique argues that OpenAI's document contains a massive, heavily disguised red flag.
A red flag. Okay, and just to set the ground rules for you listening, before we get too deep into this, our goal today is to impartially break down the author's critique of this text.
Right.
We are not endorsing a side or, taking a political stance on OpenAI's corporate strategy. We are simply exploring the profound implications of the argument the author is making here.
Exactly. Just looking at the ideas.
So, looking at OpenAI's document, the title itself, Ideas to Keep People First, that projects a very specific, optimistic tone, right?
It is like a host.
Yeah, and it spends 13 pages discussing fairness and equity and broad societal benefits. But the author of our critique points to one specific sentence near the beginning that they argue, completely shatters that illusion.
Yeah, the author zeroes in on a sentence that is, well, it's meticulously crafted. Let me just read the exact quote from OpenAI's proposal.
Go for it.
It says, but broad participation in the AI economy should not depend on access to the most powerful models. It should depend on access to AI that is useful, affordable, preserves people's privacy, and expands their individual agency.
Okay. I mean, on a casual read, that sounds perfectly reasonable.
Right.
It sounds like a solid commitment to making sure everyone has access to a helpful tool.
But there's a catch.
Yeah, exactly. When you apply a critical lens to it, that phrasing should not depend on access to the most powerful models. The author argues that acts as a legal and structural euphemism.
Yeah, it's doing a lot of heavy lifting.
It really is. It's essentially a quiet concession that the general public simply will not have access to the absolute cutting edge. Like, you get the AI that is, quote, useful and affordable, right? While the world-altering artificial superintelligence just stays in-house. Let me actually unpack this with an analogy.
Yeah.
It sounds like the author is saying this policy is the equivalent of giving everyone a really reliable bicycle and calling the transportation economy fair, while the creators secretly keep a fleet of teleportation devices for themselves.
That is a perfect way to put it, yeah. The author reads this as a definitive declaration of a two-tiered system.
A two-tiered system, wow.
Right, where the public receives these consumer-grade tools that are engineered for standard productivity, while a select few retain the master key, the teleporter, in your analogy.
Okay, so to understand why the author views this as such a systemic threat, we have to look at how they quantify the gap between these two tiers, right?
Exactly, because the text moves way past our current understanding of AI.
Yeah.
Like, we're not talking about the large language models we use today to draft emails or write some code.
Right.
It asks us to consider artificial superintelligence, or ASI.
And this is where the scale of the technology shifts from just being impressive to almost incomprehensible.
Yeah.
The author actually uses a historical benchmark to ground this concept for us, don't they? Isaac Newton.
Yes, Isaac Newton. We were talking about a supreme human intellect here with an estimated IQ of 190.
Okay, so a genuine genius.
Right. So the author proposes a scenario where a corporate entity develops an ASI that is 10 times more intelligent than Isaac Newton.
10 times Newton?
Yeah, 10x Newton superintelligence. And the critical divergence happens when we look at the distribution of that model.
Distribution meaning who actually gets to use it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In the author's scenario, A tiny elite group holds exclusive access to this 10x Newton model. Meanwhile, the broader public, so small businesses, independent researchers, you listening right now, is limited to models that are intentionally capped.
Capped how?
Well, we might be granted access to an AI that is just a fraction of that intelligence, like half, a quarter, an eighth, or even 1/50th is capable.
Okay, wait, hold on. Let me push back on the author's logic here for a second.
Sure.
Because if we actually do the math on that hypothetical, a public restricted to an AI that is, quote, only half as smart as the 10x model, that still possesses a 5x Newton superintelligence, right?
Right.
That is an entity 5 times more intelligent than the most brilliant human mind in history.
It's massive.
Yeah. So if I have a 5x Newton AI assisting my startup, I am performing at an unimaginable level. Why does the author view this specific fractional gap as a tool for total market domination? Wouldn't a 5x Newton AI be more than enough to compete?
I mean, it's a completely natural assumption to make,
Yeah.
but it relies on viewing economic competition as this sort of linear proportional game.
Okay, and it's not.
Not according to the author.
Yeah.
The counter-argument hinges on the mechanics of compounding advantages at the absolute highest levels of cognition.
Compounding advantages.
Yeah. When we discuss intelligence at this totally unprecedented scale, we are no longer just talking about raw knowledge storage.
Right.
We're talking about processing speed, insanely complex pattern recognition, and execution latency.
Ah, okay. So it's not just about who knows more facts. It's about who can synthesize those facts and act on them first.
Precisely.
Let me try another analogy here. It's not like bringing a knife to a gunfight. It's more like playing chess against a machine that's capable of seeing 50 moves ahead, while your computer's hard-coded to only see 5 moves ahead.
Oh, that's exactly it.
You don't just lose the game, you never even understand the strategy that dismantled you.
Right. And the financial markets provide the perfect sandbox to observe this mechanism in action.
How so?
Well, if an elite group operates an ASI that is structurally twice as smart and twice as fast as your 5x Newton model, they don't just edge you out by a few percentage points on a trade. They identify the hidden profit margins, what quantitative traders call the alpha, and they just vacuum it all up before your slower model even registers that a trade opportunity exists.
Wow. Because in algorithmic trading, the market totally rewards the entity that acts in microseconds.
Exactly.
Second place algorithm, I mean, even if it arrives at the exact same brilliant conclusion just a millisecond later, it gets absolutely nothing. The alpha is gone.
The alpha is gone. And the author applies this zero-sum dynamic to virtually every sector.
Give me an example.
Consider pharmaceutical research.
Yeah.
Say both the elite's 10x Newton model and the public's 5x Newton model are tasked with inventing a novel cure for a disease.
Okay.
The superior model discovers the molecular structure days or weeks faster.
And files the patent.
Right. It immediately files the patent, legally locking the 5x Newton model, and by extension, the public completely out of utilizing that discovery.
Yeah.
So the author's core thesis here is that an intelligence advantage, when magnified to the level of ASI, creates a runaway compounding effect. The winner simply takes the entire sector.
Okay, so if this insurmountable advantage exists, and the algorithmic deck is stacked so heavily in favor of whoever holds the 10x model, we have to look at who is actually holding the keys.
We do.
Why is the author so convinced this ends in disaster? Let's play devil's advocate for a second.
All right.
A small group of brilliant engineers creates this supreme ASI. Why couldn't they just use their 10x Newton model to cure diseases, stabilize the climate, and, equitably distribute the resulting wealth? Like, why not hope for the best?
Well, the author tackles that exact question by really examining the realities of human nature and corporate structure.
Okay.
The critique argues that unless we invent a literal morality pill, that's the phrase that transforms this elite, ASI-empowered superminority into perfect angelic beings, history provides every reason to fear the outcome.
Right, because historically humans aren't exactly known for flawless benevolence.
Exactly. The essay explicitly points out that as a species, humans just have not transcended selfishness. We exhibit a documented indifference to the plight of others. And that indifference only magnifies when people are separated by vast chasms of power and wealth.
So what does this mean? It's like the author is saying we're relying on the hope of a benevolent dictator.
Pretty much.
But history shows that whenever a tiny group holds absolute power, whether it's land, military might, or now ultimate intelligence, the natural gravity just pulls toward feudalism, with everyone else working as digital serfs. Expecting a tiny group of humans to suddenly behave with flawless, selfless benevolence simply because they invented a hyper-intelligent computer is, in the author's view, dangerously naive.
Dangerously naive.
Yeah.
And furthermore, the author emphasizes that the entities building these models are not philanthropic collectives, right?
They're corporations.
Yes,
Hmm.
they are corporations. And by their very design, corporations have a legally binding fiduciary duty to their stakeholders.
Oh.
Their core structural mandate is to maximize value for their investors. So the author argues that asking a corporation to voluntarily surrender its most profound competitive advantage, to essentially dismantle its own monopoly for the sake of global egalitarianism.
It violates the fundamental mechanics of how these institutions operate.
Exactly. It's asking a corporation to act against its own legal structure.
So if the underlying corporate mechanics basically dictate hoarding the advantage, what does the resulting society look like?
Well, the author specifically uses the term techno-feudalism to describe this trajectory.
Techno-feudalism, wow.
Yeah. We're looking at a modern manifestation of a very ancient structure. So instead of lords controlling the land that peasants require to harvest food,
Tech lords control the superintelligence that the public requires to participate in the economy.
you got it.
And this ties perfectly back to that carefully worded sentence in OpenAI's document we talked about earlier.
It does.
Broad participation should depend on access to AI that is useful and affordable. You are permitted to participate in the economy, but only as a digital serf.
Right.
You rent access to the inferior, artificially capped tool from the tech lord just to survive, knowing full well your rented tool can never, ever outcompete the landlord's private model.
The system is mathematically engineered to maintain the hierarchy.
That is a grim assessment.
It really is. But this grim assessment is exactly what drives the author to their ultimate conclusion.
Okay.
If corporate benevolence is a structural impossibility, and if a two-tiered intelligence system inevitably leads to techno-feudalism, the author argues we need an uncompromising circuit breaker.
So how does the author propose we stop this? Because, pointing out the flaw is one thing, but disrupting a deeply entrenched corporate trajectory requires a massive structural shift.
Yeah, and the author's proposed solution is absolute and hardline.
Okay, what is it?
They conclude that the highly important bottom line is our most intelligent ASIs. The bleeding edge, 10x Newton superintelligence itself, must be available to everyone.
Everyone.
Everyone. To ensure this outcome, the author states that super powerful ASIs must be developed within the open source community so they're available everywhere.
Okay, let's break down the mechanics of what that actually means, because the author is not just saying, hey, make the app free.
No, not at all.
They are essentially arguing that democratizing the actual source code is the only guaranteed way to democratize the future.
Wow.
The architecture of the artificial mind itself has to be public.
Exactly. By democratizing the source code, you ensure the technology is universally available for anyone to inspect, modify, and deploy.
Wow.
And the author stresses, this isn't something society should merely hope for, like a utopian fantasy or a polite request in an op-ed column.
Right.
It is something we must absolutely demand. It's an open source mandate. The essay argues that if we don't demand open source development, we are actively consenting to the techno-feudal state.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. The author is completely bypassing traditional solutions.
Yeah, they are.
Like, they aren't arguing for better regulations or government oversight committees. They're not suggesting we impose higher taxes on the processing hardware, the compute required to run these massive models.
No.
They are arguing that open source is the singular, guaranteed mechanism to prevent a monopoly.
And the logic is really rooted in how open source communities function today.
Walk me through that.
Well, when code is public, you harness the collective brainpower of millions of independent developers globally.
Right.
This huge decentralized network can iterate, adapt, and build safety guardrails significantly faster than a single isolated corporate team working behind closed doors.
Makes sense.
So by releasing the 10x Newton model to the public, the cognitive baseline of, say, a university in a developing nation or just a single developer in a garage becomes identical to the largest tech conglomerate on Earth.
It effectively neutralizes the compounding advantage we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
If everyone possesses the 50-move chess engine, no single entity can blindly dominate the board.
Right.
The power dynamic shifts from hoarding extreme intelligence to how creatively an individual can apply universally available extreme intelligence.
It creates a forced equilibrium.
Oh,
The author's mandate suggests that if the intellectual playing field is perfectly level, the market remains competitive rather than zero-sum.
okay.
It ensures that the alpha, as we called it earlier, is not permanently captured by a single untouchable algorithm.
Which brings the stakes of this debate directly to you, the listener,
Yeah.
because it is incredibly easy to brush off a 13-page corporate policy document as just dry bureaucratic posturing.
Oh, for sure.
But this document and the furious critique against it represent the tectonic plates of the future economy literally colliding.
Yeah.
The decisions being cemented right now, today, dictate the reality of your career 5 or 10 years down the line. They determine whether your retirement investments might be managed by tools that are structurally rigged to lose against a corporate super algorithm.
Exactly.
And ultimately, they determine whether you will be an architect of your own economic future or merely a tenant in an economy owned by someone else, a participant or a subject.
The debate over the open source mandate fundamentally asks who gets to own the next era of human advancement.
It really does.
But, if we follow the author's logic to its ultimate conclusion, it reveals a secondary, deeply philosophical dilemma.
What do you mean?
Well, if the open source mandate succeeds entirely,
Like, if the 10x Newton superintelligence is stripped from the corporate vault and placed directly into the public domain?
yes, imagine a world where that mandate is fulfilled.
Okay.
A flawlessly capable, open-source 10x Newton artificial superintelligence is freely available, just sitting in the pocket of every single person on Earth.
Right.
Any complex problem, any scientific hurdle, any creative endeavor you can think of can be solved or generated in milliseconds by the AI on your phone.
Wow.
In a world where everyone possesses ultimate equal on-demand genius, what happens to human motivation?
Yeah.
When the intellectual playing field is not just leveled, but elevated to absolute perfection for everyone instantly, how do we define individual achievement? And ultimately, in a world where the machine can flawlessly execute any thought you have, what will you choose to do with your own mind?